Of those people at MSNBC who ignore all the important things and manufacture consent for the wars and everything, Chris Hayes is one of the better ones. Like, he will sometimes say something important. Now, that does not exempt him from all the other stuff. It doesn't exempt him from going all in on Russiagate, which was ridiculous. It doesn't exempt him on going all in on Syria chemical weapons or avoiding the U.S. blowing up Nord Stream or never using the word proxy war for Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. But here he is doing an okay report on Israel and Gaza, which is rare for MSNBC, as you and I both know. He's talking about the Ley Law, which he'll describe it, but it basically forbids the U.S. from sending arms to countries that are violating human rights, which, we don't actually care.
Seems straightforward. Ley Law barred the Pentagon and the Department of State from transferring U.S. arms to countries that we thought were committing human rights abuses.
What he doesn't mention is, of course, that's laughable on its face. Even when it was passed back many years ago, it was laughable on its face because the United States picks and chooses who is committing human rights, right? We can make up human rights abuses about someone we view as an enemy, like China. They don't actually have to be committing human rights abuses. We can just create things. And then we can ignore human rights abuses with our allies. So it's kind of a ridiculous law to begin with, but anyway.
And that is what I keep thinking of as I process the news that on the way out the door, the Biden administration is going to transfer $8 billion more in weapons to Israel, including fighter jets and attack helicopters, bombs, warheads, and artillery shells. $8 billion in weaponry given over to an ally waging what I think can only be described as total war in Gaza.
No, it could also be described as genocide. He does later use the words genocide and ethnic cleansing, so I'll give him credit for that. But in this moment, it's not total war. It's genocide. But again, he's, equivocating. Like I said, I'm going to point out where he's doing kind of propaganda, but I wish more people in the mainstream media were covering this story.
That has, according to, I think, multiple independent experts and reporters and NGOs, been committing war crimes. And ethnic cleansing, according to a former Israeli defense minister, where Israeli soldiers say they have been ordered to target and kill innocents arbitrarily, including children, and that they have used Palestinians as human shields for their operations in Gaza. As whistleblowers and detainees say the Israeli authorities regularly torture Palestinian prisoners. The UN says Israel is using starvation as a strategy in Gaza. Amnesty International says Israel is committing a genocide. Dozens of doctors, nurses, and paramedics who volunteered in Gaza and were there and saw up close told the New York Times they'd seen, as you see the images there in front of you, multiple children who were shot in the head or chest, bullets. And they even brought back the x-rays you're seeing right now to prove it, so people would believe that they had seen children with bullets lodged in their skulls.
Every one of these stories that he is just, and again, I'm giving him credit, that he's just presented on MSNBC should have been a major story in and of that time. When Human Rights Watch said it was ethnic cleansing or a genocide. When Amnesty International finally, after like a year, said this is genocide. Each of these times, and many of them I covered as they happened, should have been major MSNBC reports. For the most part, they were completely ignored. Maybe MSNBC put a little article on the back of their website so that they can say they covered it, but it should have been major coverage, each of these things. Instead, we get this one report that Chris Hayes is doing after 15 months of genocide. I don't watch Chris Hayes essentially ever, unless it's some clip that's started to gain attention. So I don't know how often he's covered this. I know, again, that of these horrific, soulless, parasitic, vomitous masses of ass cancer that are MSNBC, he is one of the better ones. So I just want to reiterate that again. I thought that was a pretty good compliment. I mean, that's the best compliment you're going to get out of me about MSNBC.
As Congresswoman Katie Porter pointed out in a House hearing last year, the U.S. ban on arms transfers to human rights abusers, the Ley Law, has one big exception.
State Department says that aid should stop immediately if there's a problem. Does it?
It totally depends on the circumstances and situation.
Does it depend on the country that's getting the aid?
It also depends on the country receiving the aid, yes.
So what country does aid not stop immediately under Leahy?
I'd have to go back and look through my notes.
You don't know what country that is? It's only one in the entire world. Guess what? Except for Israel.
Treating him like a child. She's like, I drew a picture for you. We stop aid going to countries committing human rights abuses, blowing up children. We stop the aid except for Israel. Except when Israel bombs children, obliterates doctors, obliterates hospitals, obliterates schools, obliterates UN employees, obliterates and tortures UN employees, obliterates journalists, kills journalists. We stop aid except for Israel.
Even now, former Senator Pat Leahy, who's no longer in the Senate, says Israel is getting a pass in violation of the spirit, if not the letter of the law, that he helped pass. Beginning in the early 2000s, I wrote to successive secretaries of state about the failure to apply the Ley Law to Israel. Their responses were either inconclusive or inaccurately claimed the law was being applied to Israel the same as to other countries, which the State Department continues to insist today. Leahy added the State Department's dismissive response not only beggars credulity, it also makes a mockery of the law. This is Pat Leahy, liberal senator, not a radical, right? Not a fringe voice in American politics.
Part of the reason Chris Hayes is allowed to stay on MSNBC is because he continues to pretend as if liberals aren't pro-war. He pretends that, like, those who support a war or support the genocide in Gaza or the ethnic cleansing or whatever, he pretends that's not liberal. Those are the ones who pretend to be liberal, but they're not the real liberal. Real liberals don't want war. Show me an example of that. Every liberal in Congress has supported the proxy war in Ukraine. A liberal is as pro-war as Republican. They are one and the same when it comes to war. That's part of why he's allowed to stay on MSNBC, is he pretends that liberals are this real force for good, and they're really trying to make the world a better place. And it's like, can you point to when they actually do any of that? Like the doing, the actual movement towards action in any way towards any of those beliefs? Can you point to any? Oh no, it's just the talking. Got it.
Someone who knows this issue, who spent decades working on this issue, and not just about Israel, about all kinds of American allies. And yet here we are. President Biden is going to hand a blank check for Israel over to the incoming Trump administration.
Also, I love Chris Hedges' incredulity that this is happening now. They're sending $8 billion more to Israel. How about the past 16 months? This $8 billion is the only one you're upset about? Each time we were sending more bombs to rain down on children, this is the one. This is the one that's upsetting. I agree. Like I said, I'm giving him credit for doing this segment. I just don't understand why it's only now.
I don't think it's coincidental that yesterday on Capitol Hill, the House overwhelmingly passed a bill to sanction officers of the International Criminal Court, to punish them for moving to charge top Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with war crimes. Keep in mind, the ICC also indicted leaders of Hamas for their war crimes appropriately, and their holding of Israeli hostages, which continues to this very day.
But another thing Chris Hayes can't say, are you going to mention the holding of Palestinian hostages? Are you going to mention the 10,000 Palestinians that are being held hostage, that are being tortured? Is that going to be, oh no, just only Israeli hostages exist. It's kind of like how only a missing white girl gets attention on our media, whereas when there's missing non-white children, they do not really get any attention in our media. I mean, when was the last time you saw a news report about a nationwide search for a non-white person? I don't know if it exists.
And 45 Democrats joined all Republicans to support this bill. We know which vision of American global engagement the Trump administration will carry out. But it isn't just Trump who this week is making an absolute mockery of every last lecture we deliver to the Russians or the Chinese or anyone else about respecting human rights and international law.
He's right about that, except it's always like that. It's been like that with Biden through the entire Biden administration. It's been like that with Obama. It's been like that with Clinton. It's been like that with Bush. It's been like that with all of them. So one of the reasons, again, that he gets to stay on MSNBC is he gets to pretend this week is upsetting. Not in general. In general, Biden's anti-war, right? In general, the Democrats are opposed to killing children. In general, it is just this week that they did an upsetting thing. Really? I feel like this is all of the times of all of the times. This is just this week, but you can have these moments where you criticize the Democrats on MSNBC. I imagine it's pretty similar with Republicans and Fox News. Fox News can have a moment where they criticize a Republican, but you can't go at the core of the system. You can't talk about it all being a vacuous mass of rot. You can't get into that. Instead, it is this moment is upsetting. They did an upsetting thing. Biden behaved differently than the Democrats always behave by sending $8 billion to Israel, except that this is exactly how the Democrats and the Republicans always behave all of the time. When was the last time the U.S. did not send missiles and bombs to Israel when requested? I don't think it exists.